Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Greetings of peace, one and all. Whoever you are, wherever you are, we are happy to welcome you to Path and Present, and we are very happy to introduce this week's episode. This is our second episode of the fall quarter, and it's a very special one. But before we get into that, I just wanted to announce an upcoming course that we're offering with Rumi Center and Sacred Footsteps, entitled Islamic Cosmology, Science of the Cosmos, Science of the Soul. This is a course which goes through this amazing book, one of my favorite books, called Science of the Cosmos, Science of the Soul, with the subtitle, The Pertinence of Islamic Cosmology in the Modern World. This book is authored by Professor William Chittick, a distinguished professor of Sufism, Islamic philosophy, specialist in Rumi, Ibn Arabi, and many of the great other masters, and one of the individuals who has done a great service to all of us in really translating and transmitting these teachings from the classical Arabic and Persian texts into the English language. This course is a 7-week online course in which we study the text week by week. Each week we'll cover one chapter and discuss the key ideas within it. This book is hard to explain, but it really takes as the premise, what if a great sage, someone who is trained in the traditional sciences and transformed by the prophetic way, a great sage, mystic philosopher from the past, was to come and be transported to the modern world? What would they say about our world, the technology, the tall buildings, the communication? We might think superficially that they would be in awe at all that we had accomplished. But what the author argues is that given that this individual is steeped in an intellectual, philosophical, mystical tradition that prizes experiential knowledge and particularly experiencing divine unity, and that there is a whole worldview associated with what knowledge is for and what the purpose of human life is, which is realization and awakening, that this individual would be actually mortified at what the modern world has become. Now, of course, we could think of a sage from any tradition, whether it's India or the Far East, China or Japan or any of these traditional civilizations, but being that the scholar focuses on Islamic civilization, he brings special focus on that, although he does bring in authors of the ancient Chinese traditions, Taoism and Buddhism and other things. So anyway, this is a book that's amazing, and it's a great way to really reflect on our world and our tradition and what it means to be people walking the spiritual path in the modern world. And so we'll examine 4 broad domains of inquiry: metaphysics, cosmology, spiritual psychology, and ethics. And we're really looking at how to transform our thought, our awareness, and our consciousness. So, of course, this course, I will be teaching it with support from our sister Zara Chowdhury from Sacred Footsteps. Sacred Footsteps is an amazing organization that really highlights the Muslim world, and again is looking at how do we look at our own tradition, not through an Orientalist lens. And really, in a certain sense, this book is like the opposite of Orientalism. What if an ancient sage came and looked at our modern world? But very, very excitedly, we also have William Chittick himself, who will be joining for a guest session to explore, discuss the topics in the book. And this is a really rare and special opportunity, so I want to encourage anyone who is interested to join us. And the course, you can find it on rumicenter.love. It's going to feature weekly videos that summarize the key themes, as well as a discussion group and writing prompts and a lot of other things. It's not just reading, it's really a course. For those who have taken the Rumi Center courses, you'll be familiar with the style. But the essence of it is reading the book and coming to discuss. So this is also sponsored in part by Mecca Books, which is a really wonderful bookseller, and you can, of course, get this book from them. So if you want to hear more about this 7-week course that will be beginning October 15th, but if you hear this a little bit after October 15th, you can still join in the 7 weeks and catch up. Anyway, visit rumicenter.love, and we'd be very happy to have you. Alhamdulillah. That brings us to this episode. Now, of course, as we mentioned in last episode, if you didn't listen, I recommend you listen, especially to that introduction where we talk about the 2.0 of Path and Present, where we will be offering episodes weekly each quarter and really just bringing you more and more Path and Present. This is made possible through your support as our listeners, and Path and Present has always been community supported. If you want to see these conversations continue, please visit patreon.com/Path and Present and become a supporter. For as little as $5 a month, a cup of coffee a month, you can be a supporter. And there's all kind of bonuses. There's a reading group. There's a private Zoom discussion at various tiers. So we'd love to have you. And then secondly, this season is brought to you and brought to the world by Sufi Corner. And Sufi Corner, again, is one of these community organizations that we have a lot of overlap, sharing Sufism, sharing Islamic philosophy and intellectual history, and sharing the Islamic arts. And I've had the honor and blessing of working with them on a number of occasions, and they have generously sponsored this season of the podcast. So shout out to Sufi Corner. I'm encouraging everyone who's in New Jersey or New York area to visit their programs in person, and if not, visit their website and their social media and check out what they have to offer. I know that they have programs with actually a number of people who are guests on this podcast, including Muhammad Rustam, last week's guest, was recently sharing his book there. So if you're interested in learning more about that, please visit their sites. And with that, I wanted to introduce our guest for this week. The guest for this week is Imam Adeyinka Mendes, who we lovingly refer to as Ade for short. And Ade is someone who I'm very, very honored to call a dear friend, someone who I met many, many years ago, and through the years we've become closer and closer. He's a teacher, he's an imam, he's a father, wonderful father, and just a all-around human being who lives with his heart, lives from his heart, and carries the light of La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah wherever he goes. And this episode, we speak about Muraqaba. Muraqaba could be translated as Islamic meditation in the Islamic or Sufi tradition. And I had the great pleasure and honor of co-leading a retreat this summer in New Mexico on Muraqaba. And so we spoke about this practice and why we did the retreat and what we've been up to. And we get into the word itself, what it means, the tradition of Muraqaba, what it is. And it's a beautiful, beautiful exploration. I won't say too much about that because if you are interested, you're about to hear the conversation. But I did want to say that for anyone who would be interested in this practice of Muraqaba, we have our second Muraqaba retreat coming up over New Year's. And this one will be in Bali, Indonesia. And this will be co-led by another dear friend, Dr. Abdullah Rothman of Cambridge Muslim College, pioneer in Islamic psychology. And Bali is an island which I love. Southeast Asia is a region I love, and there's 18,000 islands in Indonesia, and I've had the blessing of traveling to many of them, as well as Singapore and Malaysia. And we've selected a retreat center that is deep, deep in nature and the beautiful, pristine, lush jungles of Bali, just north of Ubud, in the center of Bali. And this will be a beautiful opportunity for a week-long contemplative retreat where we'll engage in meditation, reflection, invocation, and dhikr, community, connection, of course, some silence and solitude and all of that, but also celebration and dhikr and song and community as well. And the retreat center also has a permaculture farm attached to it. And so we'll be eating local, healthy, regenerative, nurturing food, and really just resetting and setting our intention for the year. We wanted to do this over New Year because everyone's talking about New Year's resolution, and what better time to go within than New Year's. So again, if you're interested in this, you can visit rumicenter.love, and you can find more about that. You can also visit muraqabaretreat.com, which is a site dedicated to this retreat. Muraqaba is spelled with a Q, Muraqaba, retreat.com. And we'd love to have you. If you're interested, please go soon because spots are filling up very quick, and we're purposely keeping it intimate with a limited number of spaces in the retreat center. And with that, we welcome you to this conversation with Adeyinka Mendes, where we focus on Islamic meditation, Muraqaba, contemplation, and his reflections on the importance of this practice for our time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, we're here with our dear beloved brother, Imam Adeyinka Mendes, Ade, and so happy to be with you, and just seeing you allows me to reminisce on our beautiful time this summer together for a week-long retreat in New Mexico at Dar al-Islam, the storied and really important place for Islam in the Americas. And of course, it was my first time there, so that was really meaningful to be there. And of course, the topic that we were exploring, and not only as a topic but as a practice, was Muraqaba. And I know you and I had an opportunity to explore that, and we had spoken about wanting to do something like this. Um, so yeah, maybe we could open by, if you wanted to share a little bit uh, for people that may not be as familiar, what Muraqaba is, and then maybe we can also get into our intention behind throwing a retreat of this sort.
Yeah, thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you. Ahmed, Baraka Blue. Thank you very much, for having me. I really feel honored and grateful to be on this particular podcast, Path and Present. It means a lot to me, and I think it means a lot to people around the world to see you sharing, uh, the knowledge and wisdom that you share on this podcast, and having the kind of conversations with your guests. And thank you again also for reaching out to me about teaching, co-teaching at the Muraqaba retreat just a few months ago. It was really, really a profound experience. And like you said, it's something that we've been talking about for a few years. And the highlight for me started, or one of the highlights for me just started at the beginning of the retreat. After the introductory session, there was a light rain, and then we saw two rainbows. which in Arabic are called bows of God, God bows. We saw two double rainbows in the sky, and right then and there, I said to myself, this is going to be a different kind of retreat. And but yeah, I think the intention behind it, it's more than just about meditation. It's more than just about contemplation and reflection. It's really about moving the needle on uh, the understanding and the practice of Islam in the modern world. Like, how do we, as Muslims, number one, go deeper into our own spiritual tradition, dive into the ocean, and discover the pearls and the gems that are there, literally speaking and figuratively speaking. And then also, how do we share that tradition? Because Islam is a holistic way. It's a path that's body, it's mind, it's soul, it's individual, it's community. And so how do we share that, and how do we give people an opportunity to really touch the light that's in them in a short amount of time? So I think those are some of the intentions that went into it.
That's beautiful. Yeah, two bows, qaba qawsaini aw adna, the two
Yeah,
bows lengths or
that's right.
near.
That's
Yeah,
right.
that
Right,
was
right from the
beautiful.
Quran, right?
Hmm.
I'm saying.
Yeah. No, and I know you'd mentioned the word meditation. Um, and I think one of our intentions behind this program, and just even speaking about this topic, is as we know, our tradition is full of so much richness when it comes to contemplative practices and disciplines. And these were part and parcel and often very central to the spiritual life of Islamic civilization. But for whatever historical reasons, that these practices are often marginalized within our communities in the modern world, let alone allowing others to be aware of them and to experience them. And I know you and I had remarked and reflected on the fact that in just the community work that we both do, a lot of young people of Muslim heritage, um, you know, their exploration of uh, meditation within a Buddhist context text or vipassana or yoga retreats, or and then often being shocked when they find out later on, years later, that actually their own tradition has uh, analogous, often similar, and perhaps even many different contemplative practices that are very central. So maybe you could just speak about what muraqaba is for those that maybe haven't heard of the word, or maybe have heard of it but have a vague sense of what it means.
Yeah, I agree. I agree wholly with you. And uh, Muraqaba is a word in Arabic that means to be watchful, to be observant, to be aware. You could even say it means to be vigilant, right? And it's Arabic is a language. It's a language where in which words are built on di-consonantal and tri-consonantal roots. And the word muraqaba is built on this root, raf qaba, or in English, you could say RQB, which is also the root of one of God's names. Muslims, one of the contemplative practices that we have is invoking the names of God. And there are many more than 99, as you know, right? But there's 99 that Muslims pay particular attention to. And those names are means of invocation, contemplation, uh, internalization, character transformation, and ultimately they're means of annihilation, spiritual annihilation. But one of those names is Ar-Raqib. which means the one who's eternally watchful, the eternal observer. Like we are not the ones witnessing, we are the witnessed as human beings, creatures. And so Muraqaba is a contemplative practice where the meditation is on deepening our awareness. It's on observing uh, the body, observing the mind without judgment, observing the soul and the self in order to gain true knowledge, knowledge of the self, which as Sufi Muslims, and that's another thing that a lot of Muslims are, shocked at is that, oh, they're Sufis are Muslims, and the word Sufi has a long, storied history in Islam, Islamic civilization, going back to the time of the ancestors, the Salaf, as-Salih. So Muraqaba is this practice that can be done in stillness. It can be done walking. It can be done driving, even when you get pretty advanced at it. Talking to people, but it starts with stillness and bringing one's attention to the inner world that's inside, the silence, listening to the sound of the silence that's within. And it's often accompanied or preceded with remembrance of God's names, like invoking God's names. And it's a practice that some scholars mention that the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon his beautiful soul, he practiced early on, right, in the cave of Hira, for example. That's one of the things that he did when he was there. And so Muraqaba is it's part and parcel of Islam. It features really in every act, all of the five pillars of Islam, right? So there's a sense of awareness and muraqaba in the testimony, in the prayer, in fasting, in making the pilgrimage, and even giving charity. Right? All of these should be done in a state of mindfulness.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And I wanted to just read a passage from Imam al-Ghazali. I actually read this on the retreat because Imam al-Ghazali has a book. He puts these two practices, Muraqaba and Muhasaba, together in a single book in his magnum opus, The Revival of the Disciplines of the Way. And this is what he has to say about Muraqaba. Know that the reality of Muraqaba is to be aware of the one watching, al-Raqib, that eternally watching one, and to turn one's attention to him. In other words, Muraqaba is a state of the heart, a state of being that results from a kind of knowledge. This state causes the action in the heart and the limbs. So it impacts both your inner reality as well as your outer reality and how you act in the world.
Mm.
The state is the heart's heedfulness or presence or awareness of the one who watches, and a preoccupation with him, or an awareness or a focus upon him. The heart turns to him, observes him, and applies itself to him. As to the knowledge which gives rise to this state, this is the knowledge that Allah sees the hearts, knows everyone's innermost secrets, watches the deeds of the servants, and oversees in every soul what it has earned. For him, subhanahu wa ta'ala, the secret of the heart is exposed, much like the exposed faces for people, but much more so. Right? So just as we see each other's faces when we smile at each other, and we can see, we can witness it very clearly, our inner reality, our inner face, our wajh, you could say, our heart is just as present or just as observable to Allah, and even more so. And then he says, there are those who are certain in this knowledge, those who really become firmly rooted in this knowledge are those who are the muqarrabun. They
Mm.
are those who are drawn near, as is mentioned in the Quran. They compromise the siddiqun, who you could say the truthful ones, those who are verified, the truth, and the people of the right hand, ashab al-yamin. Again, these are Quranic terms. Therefore, their muraqaba is on two levels. So again, he's now going to say that there's two levels of muraqaba, and he gives this higher level first, and then he says a level below that. So he says the first is the muraqaba of the siddiqun, those of, you could say, truthfulness or even highest integrity among those near to God. This is the muraqaba of glorification and exaltation, in which the heart is enveloped in the awareness of this exaltation. It is crushed by awe, he says, crushed by awe, reverence. Therefore, it has no room to truly consider another. This then is the level of those who have attained muraqaba, whose hearts are dominated by exaltation and glorification. This is the person with a single focus, for God has spared him other foci. So this is the highest level, of course, someone who is, you could say, as you mentioned, a type of annihilated in the divine presence, this fana, just extinguished, where one is really experiencing in a way that overpowers and overwhelms, and it fills one with complete reverential awe about the
Exactly.
majesty and the beauty of the divine reality. Now, of course, this is a high level. So for
Right.
those of us that don't find ourselves perpetually in this state, he mentions that there's a level of those who are not quite at this level, but are still people of Muraqaba. And he says these are those that are the people that attain a true level of uh, righteousness amongst the people of the right hand. And he describes them as follows. This group is that of those whose hearts are overcome by the certainty that God sees the heart's interiors and exteriors. However, the awareness of divine majesty does not yet dazzle them. On the contrary, their hearts keep within the limit of balance and are capable of attending to states and needs. While performing deeds, however, they never fail to be mindful, to be vigilant. They are certainly dominated by haya, a type of humility before God, advancing and retreating only upon confirmation in it. They abstain from what might disgrace them on Yom Qiyamah, but since they already consider that God sees them in the world, they have no need to wait for the resurrection. So, this is just a beautiful, beautiful encapsulation and explanation that really, I think, gets to the center of this is that,
Mhm.
again, as the Prophet defined ihsan, it is to worship Allah as if you are witnessing Him, if you're seeing Him, and if you are not seeing Him, He sees you. And so it's to be in this perpetual state of awareness of the divine awareness. And you brought out this point about Muraqaba being almost mutual observation,
It
right?
is.
There's one who is always observing us, but are we bringing our observation, or you could say there's one who is always aware of us? Are we bringing our awareness
Mm.
to meet
Yeah.
that, or are we heedless, right? And so this is this idea that there are those that attain this inner state of presence, is
Mhm.
another word we could use, with Allah, such that they're in every action, in every interaction, they're contemplating, how does Allah love me to be? How
Mm.
does Allah love to see my heart and what I intend and in the qualities, but then also my actions and my words? And that were they to slip and fall short of that, they immediately have an awareness of that and bring themselves back into alignment. So that's that first level. And then it leads to a level of, actually, you could say, ecstasy or bliss.
Right.
That it's not just a kind of vigilant struggle with the self till one attains it, but it actually opens
Mm.
that this presence of the divine actually becomes so sweet that one actually loses awareness of multiplicity in that intensity and immensity of that, the beauty of the divine presence. So maybe you could highlight the point you were making about muraqaba as this mutual thing, and also any commentary you had about that passage.
Yeah, I love the fact that you have brought Imam al-Ghazali, who's one of the greatest sage scholars in the human history. And I think it's time that more people discovered him in the West and the East. And the book that you mentioned, Ihya al-Medin, The Revival of the Disciplines of the Way, it uh, really centers the practice of religion around awareness of God and awareness of the life to come after this life. And Imam al-Ghazali, he has another book that I love to teach from called The Alchemy of Happiness, which is a summary of the Ihya al-Madin. And because sometimes people will say, well, meditation, Islamic meditation, Sufi meditation is for the advanced. It's not supposed to be practiced by people who are just starting on their path. It's not for beginners. Imam al-Ghazali places Muraqaba right at the beginning of the Alchemy of Happiness, which he wrote for the masses. This is why he wrote it in Persian, in Farsi, not in Arabic, as he did with the book that you read that beautiful passage from. And he says something really profound. He says that this practice opens the heart to the kingdom of God. And he says a lot of other things. But the thing about Muraqaba that I think is so beautiful, as you said, the word Muraqaba, it has a pattern in Arabic that indicates mutuality. So any word that's on this pattern, mufa'ala, like Muraqaba, it indicates two subjects that are doing the same action towards each other. So mukataba means to write someone, right? You write them and they write you, right? Muhawara means to have a conversation like we're having now. This is muhawara. We're talking to each other. And so muraqaba is this practice where you are aware, as you said, of the divine awareness of you. It's your awareness of the divine awareness. And that mutuality leads to affinity. It leads to love, right? It leads to connection. It leads to this deep feeling of presence. And that's something that's, I think, really special in our world today when we have an epidemic of loneliness, right? To come into this knowledge that you're never alone, that access to God's presence is always there for you. We live in this world where so much of our attention is dispersed, as you said, into multiplicity, right? We see the multiplicity of creation. My wife, my husband, my job, my recreation and my food and, my fears, my anxieties. And, we have so much that's, filling up the space of our hearts and our minds, right? And Muraqaba is this practice where, as you were saying during the retreat, I never heard anyone use this before you said it, where you really cultivate this heartfulness, not just mindfulness, but how does the heart become full and focused? Like one of the great ones, the great awakened ones said, I learned Muraqaba from watching a cat, watching a cat hunt for its prey. And so it's this, concentration and focus on the reality of God and realizing that God's gaze is at the same time, beyond time, focused on our hearts. Right? I think that's really, really, really at the root of what Muraqaba is offering human beings in this time.
Man, I think that's really beautiful. And, we reflected on the fact that um, when it comes to the retreat space or kind of programs, there's ones that are very much social and often family retreats, which these are very beautiful and really important, these kind of retreats. There's also retreats that are very much about studying and learning and knowledge intensive. Again, this is very important, especially in our busy lives, to equip people with knowledge who may not be able to go be seminary students for years of their life, but they in these short programs can really get a foundation of their tradition. But we had observed that there's not really, we weren't so aware of, kind of practice intensives, right? Really implementing these
Mm,
practices, and how without that, um, the path or religion can either become a very social thing, right? In the sense of we're all together, which has its beautiful component. But again, that's not the essence. Is what about our own path? Or it can be a very heady thing where you're kind of like in your head a lot about what I believe, or I memorize this list of attributes of God, and now I know my religion, and these kind of things where it's like, what about, um, I wrote just some of my own reflections right after our retreat, and here's just a few of the things. We all seek inner peace. We all seek to be more present and more aware, to more fully experience our lives, to live from our most essential selves.
mm,
We often find ourselves scattered and forgetful. We find ourselves pulled in many directions.
mm, mm,
We find ourselves absent minded. We find ourselves anxious and fearful. We find ourselves grieving and negatively impacted by past experiences. We all intuit there is a way to remove the clouds of dispersion and to find stillness and inner peace, to access a wellspring of love and trust and submission, to let go of our anxieties and our need to be in control, and to rest in the serenity of true surrender. And I think what struck me is that this gets to the root of the human condition. It doesn't matter what country you're from, doesn't matter what religion you ascribe to. This is the human condition,
mm,
and these practices, whether it's dhikr, fikr, forms of contemplation, reflection, observing the signs in nature, introspection, meditation, invocation, prayer, all of these practices, as well as true intentional community, intentional communion, suhba, um, they're medicinal to the human soul.
mhm, mhm,
They get down to something very essential in us. And if we look at life in the pre-modern world, that these practices were central to the way that people experience their lives. Um, they were woven into the fabric of life. And our modern world, it's just not the norm that people have these experiences, these practices as part of their day in, day out, week in, week out practice. I'm actually in Istanbul right now, and I'm in a neighborhood called Sharshambe or Ismailaga, which is this is a Naqshbandi Sufi order. This is their neighborhood. And I was actually at the tailor getting some pants sewn that had ripped. Um, and the adhan went off for Asr. And my tailor, he said, uh, I could finish it now. It'll just take a minute. He said, but let's go for Asr because then we won't be rushed. And like he like pointed to his heart, almost like it
mm.
would be a kind of distraction to not go to prayer first. And so we
Yeah,
walked.
yeah.
He closed his shop. We walked just across the street to the local masjid, and nothing fancy, just the local small mosque. We entered uh, after the adhan, but before the iqama, and so we had time to do two cycles of prayer. And I prayed next to him. He's an older man, and we just sat in contemplation for about 5 minutes. Then we stood for prayer with the group. Then afterwards, we collectively did some invocation together.
Mm,
And then one of the elders in the community, I thought we were then going to get up, but then he said he pointed me and put five up, like 5 minutes. And one of the elders in the community got up and he commented on one verse of the Quran.
that's good.
Just he read it in Arabic and then commented in Turkish, and just for 5 minutes. And so all the shopkeepers, all the workers, all the ones who worked in the local restaurants, this is what they do after every prayer. So multiple times a day, even though this is their work day, right? They're not full-time seminary students, but
Mm.
imagine a lifetime of that. If after every prayer you just get this like beautiful 5-minute commentary on a verse, and then you go back to work.
Right.
And so I'm just reflecting on
Mm.
the way that this is prayer, this is contemplation, this is invocation, this is study and reflection on the sacred scripture, that this was just woven into life. And unfortunately, we have to go away from our life to get retreats to do this, right? The goal, though, of course, is not just to escape our lives, but to fortify ourselves in a certain sense so that we can return back to our busy lives and bring these practices of presence into our lives.
Yeah, that's yeah. I wish I was with you in Turkey. Alhamdulillah. Yeah, that's it's one of those places where you really see the uh, the possibilities, for a modern populace to really, be prosperous, to live full lives while still being connected to the divine, while still being connected to family, while still being connected to community, and where the relationships between the master and seekers, it's still, very much, part of the warp and weave of the social fabric, and so that's a really beautiful reflection. I think that the retreat experience, it's an interesting word. When I think about retreating, I think of a battlefield, right? And you retreat on the battlefield. Hopefully, it's strategic, right? You retreat so that you can advance, so that you can, you know, you know, get your troops back together and reform, and so we go into these retreats not to escape. And I think there may be people who are watching this, listening to this, who may feel or think that all this spiritual stuff, all this contemplative stuff is really kind of an escapism, or even retreats, right? It's somehow a distraction from the real work in the trenches. And what I found in my own life is that if you don't know yourself, you are not seeing the world clearly. Now, if your goal is to make decisions that are going to bring benefit to yourself, your family, your community, your country, to the world, you need to see and know the world for what it is. And Imam al-Ghazali's thesis is, how can you know the world if you don't know yourself? How can you know the world if you don't know the thing that's closest to you? And so I think that the practice retreat, as you called it, is really, it's more aligned with the prophetic way. Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wasallam, God bless him and grant him peace with his family and companions. He didn't have a seminary, right? It wasn't a seminary, right? He didn't have a college or a university where there were classes and there was a syllabus and a curriculum, and there were, tests and grades, and he didn't. It was this. I would say it was this hybrid between this suhba, this socializing, but with purpose. Maybe you can call it purposeful socializing. We say communion or companionship, fellowship, and practice. And I think that's one of the things that Allah Ta'ala, God exalted us, He blessed us to achieve and to taste. During the 7 days we were together, there were opportunities to, fellowship and be in companionship with the people that were there, but also, 80%, maybe more of our time was spent on practice, not just talking, not just talking about Muraqaba, not talking about tasawwuf or Sufism, not talking about spirituality, not theory. It was, rolling up your sleeves and, really diving in with both feet and engaging and doing that as individuals, but also as a collective. So I think that's really powerful. And I was it's interesting you mentioned you're in Istanbul. Do people in Istanbul, do you see the practice of muraqaba as something that people talk about, or something that is practiced either by Sufi tariqas or by individuals?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that struck me is that actually this neighborhood that I'm near, this Naqshbandi order, their dhikr is all silent. So they actually do silent invocation. So when you walk into their gatherings, you might think like if you see some other orders, or you're used to like the Mevlevis, or you're used to like singing, or you're used to loud invocation or drumming, right? Some people associate Sufism with all those things, and of course some orders have those things. But in this one, it's just everyone's silent, it's facing, orienting themselves towards the Kaaba, right? So, and I think there's something really beautiful about that, and beautiful that there's different orders having different practices. Um, the other thing that I just noticed about the mosques here is that the mosques, unlike some in America, right, the mosques are pretty much always open. And so, and they're often, right, some of them are quite large. And especially around, you know, the neighborhoods, there'll be the central mosque, the Jami, right? Um, and if you walk in, what's beautiful about it is you have everything. One is that these mosques, they're often a place for family gathering, and so people will either be out in the garden outside of the mosque, or inside with their young children, and there will be a social dimension. But because the mosques are so large, you'll find people just in the corner in meditation, or in invocation, or in reading. And there's always people, and it's the space is really respected as a contemplative space, while also providing space for children to run freely and be joyful. Um, and so I think they strike this really beautiful balance. And then you walk outside, and that's more where the families tend to be, and kids are riding their bikes, and families are having picnics. But there is a sense that even that social celebratory aspect of life, let's go to the local mosque where there's beautiful gardens outside, you know? Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
I heard there's a saying in Turkey that a mosque without children running around has no future. And so the noise of children running around, and it's really this, like you said, this beautiful balance, because I've been to mosques here in the States where people they shush children, right?
Right, right.
All the time, so that I can contemplate, so that I
Mm,
can quiet and concentration in my salah and my prayer. And in Turkish culture, that's there. Yeah, the masjid, the mosque is seen as a place for that vertical connection, that vertical relationship with the divine, but also they make space for the noise and the kind of rumping around that just comes with family. And I hope our masjids here in the West take note, you know,
mm.
that you can have both.
One of the things I know that we intended with this retreat is, like you said, that it not just be that we do these practices and then we leave, but that we actually are equipping people with these practices for them to take with themselves and to embody. And I think one of the things is, having done a number of retreats, one of the things that's been the most like moving is that our WhatsApp group for our retreat is that people are sharing still
All
to
the
this
time,
day very
all
regularly,
the
more
time.
than any retreat I've ever been
Yeah,
on,
yeah,
to
yeah.
because we did a challenge afterwards. All right, basically this idea of, if let's all intend to do 5 minutes of Muraqaba a day, and 5 minutes is, it's small enough that, oh, I can do that, and then if you want to do longer, but just for that consistency's sake. And it's so beautiful to have people sharing that where they're doing it, or sharing a picture of where they are. And I just feel that, again, empowering people with these practices to bring into their daily lives is really the key. And it gets to this idea too of the middle way, that um we're not like a monastic tradition. We don't have monks and nuns, but yet every one of us is asked to have a component of our life that is like that. I mean, Ramadan is a perfect example where everyone who is able is fasting from sunup to sundown, which is usually reserved for the monks and the nuns in most traditions, right? These kind of really more intensive month-long practices. But yet we're all invited into this. Um, Likewise, we're all encouraged around, prayer in the last third of the night, and certain periods of invocation, and certain periods of contemplation, and yes, even periods of khalwa, of seclusion, of going away from the hustle and bustle of your day-to-day life, but not
Mhm.
for forever, but to come back into it with that intentionality and that awareness. And I think even more so in our time, just because the nature of the pulls on our attention, the nature of distraction, the pace of life, um, the fact that most of us don't have communities in which, like here, things are woven into, where there's contemplative
Mm,
breaks in your day that is just known and understood.
mm,
For you, someone to just you know close up their shop multiple times a day to go for prayer, that would be considered, oh, well, you know, that your customers would be upset, and how could they do that? These kind of things. Whereas here, it's like, oh yeah, of course, I know where he's at. I know why it's shut. I'll just wait maybe 5-10 minutes and he'll be back. So we need ways, we need to establish ways to really weave these practices um, into our lives. And another thing that we talked about is muhasaba, that we did muraqaba and muhasaba.
mm.
So maybe you could just speak about um, the complementary practices that we did in this program, because it wasn't just meditation, but we did dhikr, and we did writing, and we did even the walks in nature that you led.
Right.
So
Yeah.
maybe you could speak about these.
Yeah, before that, I just like to say a word about the monasticism uh, thing. And I wonder if think about this, because I think about this a lot. I remember when I first embraced Islam. I think I was in my second year as a Muslim. This is like over 30 years ago. Alhamdulillah. And I was in college, and one of the guys, he's maybe 1 or 2 years ahead of me. He said to me, he even watched me for a couple of years. We were friends, not super close, but we used to talk, build. He said, "Man, you're like a monk," you know. And I'm the furthest thing, especially in college. I was the furthest thing from being a monk. But I think he was speaking to something. You know, Muslims, the Islamic faith, the Muslim faith, it's not a monastic faith, but Muslims are still called into this monastic rhythm of life. And if you look at a convent or you look at a monastery, they're chanting, they're up before dawn, they're serving, there's silence, they're practicing a craft of some kind, there's service. And your average everyday Muslim, like you said, the people of the right hand, people should understand the people of the right hand are the masses. That's not some elect group. you know, the people of the right hand are the masses of people who are, again, they're arranging their life, punctuating their life with these connections to the divine, right? Without, again, taking a vow of celibacy, without taking a vow of poverty, without taking a vow of seclusion, from society. I think that's really, really powerful, and make what makes Islam just so relevant, to modern people. Um, Yeah, another thing I loved about the retreat is what you just said. It wasn't just meditation. It was self-auditing. Is that how you translate muhasaba? Self-reckoning, self-auditing. How would you translate it?
Yeah, all those are good words. Retrospective, or
Retrospect, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and alhamdulillah, I love, because you taught most of the content for the muhasaba sessions, and I love the way you approached it because we did have, at least one person who was a bit concerned. I remember a bit concerned about being triggered, from a introspective practice that might bring up things from their past. And I love the way that you approached it. Um, Number one, using journaling as a consistent practice, particularly for the muhasaba, and sometimes like really humorous, right? Like one of the attendees who, when you asked us to write a letter to ourselves from our higher self to our lower self, hilarious, right? Hilarious. The things that he said, but so real at the same time, so honest, like naked truth, but packaged with humor. And uh, I think the muhasaba was really where people got this opportunity to reflect, you know, and to see and to process a lot of the things that they've been doing in the Muraqaba sessions earlier in the day. Muhasaba generally is, as Imam al-Ghazali mentions, it's taking yourself to account in this life before you're taken into account in the hereafter. Right? There's that saying of Umar ibn al-Khattab, the companion of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, take yourself to account before you're taken into account. And but you did it very gently, right? You invited people to explore that in a very gentle way, um, not focusing on the darkness that's in us, but rather focusing introspectively on the light, right? On the light that's in us. The other practices I think really rounded out the retreat. The walks in nature, where we were showing people that meditation is not just something you do at home. It's not just something you do in the masjid. It's not just something you do in a yoga studio, right? Like God's creation is this, as George Washington Carver once said, that the great African American agricultural scientist who was a great sage in his own right, that nature is God's broadcasting station. You just need to tune in, and so Muraqaba really helped us to tune in and just to let people know, because I think the people that are watching and listening, they should try this. Just take a hike. Um, it could be at a city park. It could be around your block. It could be in a state park, right, where it's more wild and uncurated. But take a walk, a meditative walk in silence. No selfies, no camera. And even if you're in a group or you're walking with a partner, a friend, a family member, don't talk. Just, you will hear things that you usually don't hear. You'll see things you usually don't see. You'll notice things about yourself and about others. And that awareness, that muraqabah, can be taken with us into every aspect of our life. So that was really cool. Doing the walking meditation. Um, we had a wonderful ensemble, the Shafik ensemble with Uncle Benjamin and Auntie Rabia, which is another kind of presence, but through music, right? So it was part entertainment, but also the words, right? The words, the lyrics, the instruments brought people into this heartfulness, that was really amazing. And then the dhikr, the chanting that we did before Fajr, especially in the last few days, before the dawn prayer. I think it was really important for me and you that people see there are different ways, different contemplative practices. There's silence, there's stillness, there's walking meditation, there's musical meditation. During some of the meals, we were a bit ambitious, right? But during some of the meals, we spent the first 10 minutes in silence, right? For example. And I remember one of the attendees told me the food tastes better when you're not talking to people. So this heartful eating, mindful eating, really, really incredible, incredible insights came out of all of that.
Yeah, I think that was really important too, to have those multiple practices and multiple entry points. Um, yeah, and yeah, exactly. I mean, just subhanallah. I mean, yeah, mindful eating and these things are so important. So much of our lives can easily just be on autopilot,
Mm.
and all of that was really beautiful. Um, I was just reflecting when you were speaking that I know some years back you did a series on that's on YouTube on Islamic meditation, and that has I think of all the things you've done, and this has the most views, and really like um it shows this interest. Um and recently I even searched about Islamic meditation, and there's really not much, which I think may speak to why your series is so popular. But I thought I might ask you your thoughts on that, because clearly the fact that like hundreds of thousands of people are watching this means that there's a real interest. What do you think that says, and what do you think? I'm sure you've reflected on this. I think you even mentioned it. People come up to you when you meet them and say like that series really impacted on me. I'm just curious if you have some reflections on that.
This is really funny. A brother, this Muslim brother from France, he reached out to me on Facebook and said, "Hey, can I talk to you?" And we exchanged numbers, and he called me and he said, "I watched all 5 of those videos, and they changed my life." He said, "I don't get road rage anymore." because I've been practicing Islamic meditation. He's like, before, when people would cut me off, I'd let them have it. And that's what I'm saying. This is really practical stuff. A lot of times we identify with our body, we identify with our thoughts, we identify with our emotions. Muraqaba shows you that you are more than all of those, right? I think there's a hunger. I think there's really, because there's such a dearth of knowledge about this subject, um, about meditation, about Islam, and about Islamic meditation. And yeah, I still meet people, and that was like almost 12 years ago, something like that. I still meet people who come up to me out of nowhere, just like complete strangers who recognize me from that series. And I think it's been shared widely because there is a deep yearning for Muslims and for Islam to return to its spiritual roots. And that's why the work that you're doing with Rumi Center for Spirituality and the Arts, the work that I'm doing with Marhama Village, the work that, this podcast is about, and so many other people that are doing good work that's in this spirit is crucial, in this time. I think people are also just looking for a track to run on. You know, like you said, we talk about the contemplative practices of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. We'll hear stories. Imam Ali radiallahu anhu got shot by an arrow, and he told people, "Okay, if you want to take it out, wait till I'm in the prayer." And He goes into prayer. They pull the arrow out of his leg while he's praying with no anesthesia. He finishes praying and he asks them, "Did you take it out yet?" Right? Like, we hear these stories, but how do you get there? Like, how do you get to that place? And that's what's missing. And so with that series, all I did in that series is just share what, great awakened masters, spiritual masters like Imam Abdullah al-Haddad, like Imam Ahmadu Bamba, and others have said in their books, in their texts, on fikr, on tafakkur, and on reflection and contemplation, on muraqaba, on meditation. And I'm very thankful that it's been well received. But it's not enough. We need so much more.
Absolutely. No, I think and it's beautiful because just the interest we've had, after our retreat, I did some programs in California with our dear friend Zara and the mushroom farm that they have out there. I did some things in New York and New Jersey with our friends at Lila and also Sufi Corner, wonderful organization out there in New Jersey, as well as in Seattle. And so, all these communities and everyone was just so, of course, we didn't do a week long. We did maybe a weekend or we did a single session or an evening event, but just to give people a taste and yeah, the yearning is there, the interest is there. And so and of course the practical dimensions, the fact that it improves your presence, it improves your just inner peace, it removes certain levels of anxiety and distractedness, all of those things have immediate impacts and really encourage. And yeah, I mean, the goal, of course, is to be in a state of muraqaba constantly. And I think, I don't know if it was you that mentioned it to me, but someone mentioned that Thich Nhat Hanh, the great Buddhist teacher, that he was interviewed by Oprah Winfrey, and she said, how often do you meditate? Or when was the last time you meditated? He goes, I'm meditating right now. And she was like, right now. But this idea, people think, oh, you have to sit a certain way. And this, no, it's just a state of presence. It's a state of awareness and cultivating a practice when you're not busy and not distracted helps you bring that into your day-to-day life. And we know this from just establishing the 5 times a day prayer. The whole point is not then to be heedless between that, but it's to be in a state of prayerfulness, a state of presence. And so these are all complementary practices. And I think, one of the things that we kind of suffer from is that a lot of people have been taught the outer component, but not the inner, right? Okay, this is how you pray, but not, okay, but how do you bring your heart to presence in prayer? Which, you know, the Quran says, and those who establish prayer, not just those who pray. And this establishment of prayer, some of the commentaries mention this, the outer and the inward. It's not just going through the motions, but those who establish prayer, those who bring their heart so that you actually have presence with it. Because it's different than just praying. Allah doesn't say that usually. It's mostly those who establish prayer, again, the outer and the inner dimension. So yeah, I'm really grateful for that. And yeah, I wanted to maybe give you some space to share about Marhama since you mentioned this for our listeners. And maybe that's a way we can close. You share about what you're up to and what you have intentions to do in the coming years, inshallah.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I'm very grateful as well. I love this journey. It's a true hero's journey. We're really going into unknown, uncharted territory. Marhama, which is a word in Arabic that's also expressing mutuality. It means to show mercy to one another, to show love, compassion, tenderness to one another. It's a nonprofit I just started, but the work that we're doing is just a continuation of work that I've been doing over the past 2 decades, in different communities, for different organizations, which is really, sharing a holistic vision and a holistic practice of Islam that is healing for all human beings. It's bringing the healing wisdom of Islam in its through fellowship, through spirituality, through like really making space for indigenous American, Native American wisdom, and for the arts, similar to what you've been doing your whole career as a poet and as a public speaker and as a teacher, and most recently through Rumi Center, is really to center arts as well as not just as a humanizing force for humanity, which it is, but also art and artisanship as a path to God. And I think, I wonder if, I know we've spoken about this before, but, people in the past, everyone didn't study Bukhari from beginning to end, or, study, books of hadith from beginning to end, but everyone had some connection with the Quran. Everyone had some connection with poetry, like mystical poetry or storytelling, and some craft or some art form that they were connected with, that they had learned from a master that refined their souls. So Marhama's, it's about building a community that's digital, that's virtual, as well as a community that's in person, that's all about these different aspects, so that we can really build a world that's more beautiful, more sacred, more just than how we found it. Inshallah, God willing.
Ameen, ameen. May Allah give you every success. And yeah, we love the work you're doing. It's always a blessing when we're able to collaborate or support and connect in any way. And praying that there's many, many years of opportunity to serve together
Amen.
as well. And yeah, I mean, just the time together, especially focusing on the work that we're doing with contemplation, Muraqaba, was so beautiful because I know it really intersects so much with really what Rumi Center is all about, what Marhama is all about. And it was just beautiful to see the interest that people have. And so praying that we can have many, many more sessions like this. And yeah, for anybody who's interested in this, muraqabaretreat.com is the website. And hopefully there'll be many upcoming sessions, inshallah.
Amen.
My beloved, thank you for joining us on Path and Present.
Hey, thank you for having me on Path and Present. May God make the path easy and always keep us present.
Ameen.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam. Assalamu alaikum, and thank you for listening to Path and Present. Path and Present is a podcast that is community supported. If you like these conversations and want to see them spread far and wide and want to become a patron of this podcast, you can visit our Patreon at patreon.com/pathandpresent. And there are various tiers where you can support this podcast. $5 a month makes you a supporter of the path and gives you a personalized thank you note from myself. $20 a month makes you a seeker of wisdom and gives you access to a bunch of bonus material, including unreleased episodes and sessions from previous Rumi Center courses and retreats. $50 a month, you join Baraka's book club, where I share reflections on my favorite books. There's always a book of the month, and we get to reflect upon it. And of course, many of the authors featured in this podcast are some of the authors of my favorite books. So we get to dive deep on that and read together. For $100 a month, you join the Sustainer Circle, and you get a personalized shout out in an episode. And also, we have a monthly Zoom Q&A and discussion for those in the Sustainer Circle. It's an intimate group of like-minded seekers, and you also get access to everything in the previous tiers. So I want to, again, thank you for listening. Of course, like and subscribe and share with friends and family who you think might be interested. And if you want to see these conversations continue, please visit us at patreon.com/pathandpresent. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.